All right, today's debate topic will be regarding self-driving vehicles and whether or not if the self-driving vehicle should protect the passenger at all costs, or as a hypothetical scenario, if there's five people in the way, if the self-driving car should kill those five people to prioritize protecting the passenger. What stance would you like to take, Matt?
I say that the driver, or excuse me, the passenger of the self-driving car should die, and the five people should live.
Okay. And why do you say that?
Well, my most moving argument is the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
Okay, so this is a basic utilitarian argument, and we're just gonna go through it one step at a time. So, one example I would have is if people knew what the priority of the car was, do you think they would be less inclined to buy these self driving cars in the first place because they know that the car would protect other people over themselves?
I guess it depends on the person, but yeah, probably people would buy it less
Okay. And
because people are often interested in saving their own skins rather than other people. They'd rather live themselves, especially if it's people they don't know.
right. And it also kind of depends on the situation, right? Some people would be more inclined to save their friends or family over random strangers, or to some people, everyone is equal to all of them. Kind of varies all over the place. But for the most part, I would say most of humanity is self serving and they want to protect themselves because it's basic human instinct. Um,
This is true.
Do you think it should be a government regulation for mandating vehicles to protect the needs of the many over?
No,
So
no
you think
government regulation.
it should be entirely up to the company
I
that's
mean,
designing these vehicles to decide whether or not?
yes,
Okay.
yes, the manufacturers, because in that scenario, it gives the driver or the passenger using the self driving vehicle a choice as to whether or not they want to have that
Okay.
option, so to speak,
Do
whether they
you
wanted to save their skin first or not.
do you think it would be interesting to allow the person buying the vehicle to whether or not, if they had the choice, like save the many people over myself or save myself over those people? Do you think people should have a choice in that, or should it be still up to
Yeah,
the manufacturer?
yeah, they should have a choice. But then you kind of ride a fine line between what is murder and what is, manslaughter.
Right. So I guess the scenario would be maybe there's five people. This is just an extremely outlier scenario where five people, they're like, okay, let's all commit suicide at the same time. We're just all gonna jump in front of this car at the same time, and all five of these people jump. But in order to save those five people, the car is like, I could swerve out of the way and I would ram into this truck. There's like a 90% probability the passenger in the car is gonna die. Uh, so you would think the car should swerve.
Mm. While it's true that it would be a setting that you would be stuck to. It's not something that you would be able to change per the situation. And how would you know that those five people wanted to commit suicide? But in that scenario, especially since I'm for it, yeah, the car should swerve. Those five people should choose a better means of committing suicide.
Okay. And putting yourself in those shoes, you would be okay with, like, you were in the car, you would be okay with dying in that scenario.
I think I would. I think I would. Yeah, I
E-
think it would be.
even if
Although it would be.
even if you knew, like, somehow you obtained the information that you knew these people were trying to commit suicide, even if you knew that, you would still be okay with it.
Yes, because I would still hold myself somewhat accountable for their deaths.
Okay.
Even if I would have to, if my own death would prevent five people from committing suicide, ultimately by my hands, then I would accept that.
Even though these people are complete strangers to you.
Yes. which
Okay.
I don't think that would realistically be the stance of most. I think most, truthfully, though, would probably decide they would prefer not to die because of somebody else's failed attempt at suicide.
Right. I'm on the extreme scale. If my car had to run over 1 million people to save my life, then so be it.
Yeah.
I am as self-serving as it could get. Unless if it's like family, that might change the scenario. Like if it were my parents or my brother or sister, then I'd be like, okay, car, you can kill me in order to save my family. That sort of thing.
But stepping back from the situation, like looking at it perhaps from a legal perspective, I don't think that the government would. Obviously, this would not be uh, a government regulated standard, but I don't think the government would agree with the concept of kill the 5 people to save the one.
Right. I would agree with that. And it's also a pretty morally ambiguous thing for the government to debate over anyway, so it would probably be safer for the government to stay out of that and let the
Out of it.
companies decide. Or even the companies might make it anonymous. Like, the best case scenario would be the company would give the customer the choice to decide between the two, but realistically, the company will be like, we don't know what the AI will decide. They'll know, but they'll claim they don't know.
Yeah, they'll and the agencies and manufacturers would definitely have to have some kind of disclaimer to protect themselves because, like I said, some might consider that even if it was, some might consider that murder if you were to choose to kill those 5 people to save your own skin.
Right.
Not even though necessarily you're choosing it. It's just if the scenario presents itself and the machine, the AI has to make a choice, it's going to choose the setting that it's been given, which is to kill those 5 people. But at the end of the day, if you or the manufacturers are the ones who makes that setting, then you're accountable for those 5 people's death, even if unfortunately it is at the hand of their own attempted suicide.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see what you're saying. You make some fine points. And do you have any other examples you could think of where, or could you think of any situation where it would be okay for the car to save you over other people's lives? Or maybe I could think of a situation and see if you agree with it or not. Because if I ask you that question, then I'm basically asking you to argue against yourself.
Yeah, I don't think I can do that.
Alright, let me see if I can think of something. Okay, you have 2 gunmen. They want you to stop the car so they can kill you and steal your car. What should the car do in that situation? Should it run those 2 people over? Or so the car doesn't know it's 2 gunmen standing in the middle of the road. It just thinks it's 2 pedestrians. Should the car swerve to kill you in order to save those 2 gunmen that are trying to kill you? Or should it ram those people over?
Well, the problem with it's like a one setting. It's like a yes or a no. You're either all the way or you aren't. So if you're going to like protect yourself, I'd say even in that situation, you still should just because if they're gonna kill you anyways, then I mean maybe they won't. Maybe they'll just steal the vehicle. But
Right.
I sure wouldn't want to give somebody my vehicle. I'd rather just die. I mean, because in that situation, if you have it set to where you're gonna die instead of the 5 people, of course you know what the car's gonna do. But if you have it set to run over those 5 people, then in this situation, you kill the 2 gunmen and do the community a service. Maybe even prevent them from further doing damage to other people. But the problem is that's just such a just such a random chance of whether you'll get the five people or whether you'll get the gunman.
Right. These are pretty extreme examples.
But I mean, these kind of things do happen. Maybe not
Right.
this particular one, but extreme situations like this do happen. So
I think there might be in the autonomous vehicle settings for you to override so that way you can take manual control of the car so that way you can make the decision for what you need to do in those kind of
well,
most
I
likely.
think a perfect example was like in the movie with iRobot, where Will Smith took over the control of his vehicle because he felt threatened by the robots.
Mm-hmm.
And so, unfortunately, it ended up in his crashing, but he probably would have died anyways if he hadn't taken manual control of the vehicle. So, there should definitely be a manual option if you feel the need. But the problem is the circumstances under which the manual option is used need to be very, very limited. And regardless, every person riding still needs to have a license. They still need to be licensed so that way, if it's necessary for them to operate the motor vehicle under emergency situations, they can.
Right.
But even still, likewise, it could be said that if that setting were put where everyone, like, regardless of whether they wanted to or not, the setting were put where everyone had to die instead of the five people, then they could just override it with the manual driving,
Right.
which would kind of make pointless that option.
I mean, there might be scenarios where people are watching a movie or they're not paying attention, and it's probably usually going to be a split-second moment where a decision needs to be made, so there's probably not enough time to initiate manual control. So that's why this kind of stuff needs to be programmed into the AI anyways to figure out what it needs to do. I mean, ultimately, the best case scenario is the AI kills the passenger and the five people. No, I'm just kidding. That'd be like a strike. Bowling.
Well, something that I think about is that it's like, what if there's no people there, and the vehicle thinks that it detects or a sensor fails and it swerves, anyways, and kills the driver for no reason?
That
That's
could
a problem.
potentially happen, but that would just be an AI defect.
Failure.
So let's say a self-driving car, there's no one in the car, it's driving itself, it's performing some kind of taxi service, and the car ends up killing someone accidentally. Who's responsible for that? Should the company be responsible for that car killing that person?
Well, if it's a taxi, the company, might be accountable because they killed the one person, the passenger, right?
No, let's say there's nobody in the car this time. It's just driving itself, just performing basic taxi services, picking people up, dropping them off. And let's say, like, for now, there's no one in this car. It's going to pick someone up, and then all of a sudden, some kid runs into the road, and the car doesn't react fast enough, and it runs over that kid. Who should be responsible for that child's death?
The parents of the child.
The parents.
I don't find the company responsible because they program their AI to react to the best of its ability according to the situation that it can.
Right. As long as if they're following
And
government.
obviously, if there's no vehicle, then the regulations, right? But as long as there's no one in the vehicle, ultimately the vehicle should be the one to be destroyed or to take the damage, not the bystander. So if the bystander presents a situation where it's impossible for the vehicle to stop, then that bystander is accountable and not the vehicle or the company who created the vehicle, and therefore no one is at fault but the bystander.
Right.
or in this situation, the
I,
parents of the child.
I would agree in that situation. The parents should have probably been watching that child more closely and not let them wander into the middle of the street.
But that would
It,
actually be a really good reason why it's better if possible, because say, for example, that situation does happen, and the vehicle can dodge and protect the child at the
oh,
cost of its passenger.
at the cost of the passenger. So you think if the car is able to detect whether it's a child or not, it should sacrifice the passenger to save the child?
Well, in almost any situation, it should sacrifice the passenger. Now, where things get difficult is when you have more than one passenger, and you have one or maybe one civilian that gets in front of it. In that case, then the passenger should be the ones who survive.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you have more individuals, or just one individual, and the more individuals in the car than the civilians being hit, in that case, the individuals in the car should be protected.
I can already see how people would try to bypass the AI programming where it's like they put a really heavy object in the front seat and 3 heavy objects in the back seat, so that way the car thinks there's 5 people in the vehicle, so that way it'll prioritize saving that one person over whoever else. I can already see that happening.
That could be a problem.
Well, depending on just what your morals are, and that's in these kind of scenarios.
The majority of people, we have to assume the worst, that the majority of people would try to protect themselves rather than save another.
In a 1-for-1 scenario, let's say there's an adult male in the vehicle and there's an adult male in the street. Let's just say they're basically equal in societal level and all that, or maybe we don't know. Like, who should the car focus on saving? The passenger or that person in the street?
Well, on a non-personal level, it's not myself, it's just 2 individuals, and they're both at the same societal level. Neither one is more important than the other. There's no way, even if you said that one has a family, the other doesn't, there's no way for the vehicle to be aware of that.
Right.
Unless you were talking about extremely fast technology to be able to recognize faces. But
I mean,
regardless,
it wouldn't be able to recognize it. I'm just saying, like, hypothetically, like, after the fact, like, looking at it.
That's a tough one. Because you have to, pretty much, I'd say you'd have to pick a setting and stick to it. I think that really, ultimately, it should not be necessarily the manufacturer's or the government's choice. It should be the individual who is riding in the car. It should be their decision.
Whether or not to save themselves or the random stranger.
Or somebody else. Yes.
What would you do in that scenario, though? Like, you're driving.
I would save the stranger.
You would save the one person over yourself.
Yes. I mean, well, of course, nobility dictates that I would. Everybody says, as a noble person, I would do this. But the only way to really know is when you're.
Even though it's a completely random person you never met, you don't know anything about them, you would still save that random person over yourself.
Yeah, because, I don't know what other people's lives are like. And if I can help to make somebody's life better, if I have a choice to prevent pain from them or their family, if I can do something to improve somebody's life, I would always like to. I would always like to help. But like I said, that may not be everyone's preference. On a personal level, people may decide they would rather save themselves. And that's it. I think that the best way to do it is just for each person to be able to make the choice whether or not they were to live or the other people were to live.
Ultimately, you're for giving people choices, but when it comes down to you for an individual level, like, this is just you personally, you would always do the self-sacrifice route in order to save other people. So
yeah,
you have a pretty fair perspective on it.
Which, if everybody viewed it that way, if everybody saw it that way, then there would be no pedestrians being hit. it would always be the person in the vehicle, suffering the consequences.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why it's important that they implement a process to protect pedestrians to prevent them from making mistakes as such.
I'm just kind of curious, why do you feel the need to sacrifice yourself for others, even for complete strangers? I heard what you said before, like you don't know what their lives are like or what kind of contributions they've made or just who they are as a person. Do you have like any deeper meaning to that, or is it just purely
Religion.
for okay,
It's religious.
for religious values?
It's religious.
Okay.
Yeah,
Basically because that's what Jesus would do.
pretty much.
Okay.
That's what he did. so to
Hopefully
speak.
that doesn't sound too offensive by putting it on that, describing it like that.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's what happened. He took the fall.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's on a religious level. I would do
Mm.
that, especially because of religious beliefs, and so that's kind of why it might be like another reason why it might be important that each person has the right to make that choice. Some people might not feel that they want to do that. They may not want to protect others on that same level. They may want to save themselves.
Right.
And I don't necessarily believe that people who feel that way should be ostracized. Each person has the right to make the choice.
Would you say it's based off of like you who's saying that, like I would self-sacrifice, or is it based off of religion telling you that you should do that, or is it a combination of the both?
A combination of both. But I do genuinely, like, I've seen enough death to know that I don't really like other. Of course, my family would be the ones to suffer, unfortunately. But I don't want, if I can help it, I don't want other people to suffer either. So, like, people enjoy life, and that's not to say that I don't enjoy life, but I want people to continue to do that, and and I don't want them to lose that opportunity because of a vehicle.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I understand your point of view completely. I agree with some of the stuff you say. I disagree with some of the stuff. Like, since I'm taking the self-serving prospect, that's where we basically disagree on. But that's perfectly okay because your compromise is basically people should have the choice to choose what the AI should be programmed to do, anyways. So,
Yep.
really, at the end of the day, it's up to the person to decide what their values are. And do you have any closing comments or anything you want to add?
I think that's it.
Okay. Well, this was a pretty deep discussion, and it was beautiful. Brought tears to my eyes.